The ceramic plate shattered against the wall 6 inches from my head, sending fragments of glass and hot food spraying across my face and hair. I stood there, frozen marinara sauce dripping down the expensive wallpaper of what was supposed to be my home, my sanctuary. My husband Ryan's face was contorted with rage, his fist still clenched where he'd hurled the dinner plate with enough force to crack the drywall. The silence that followed was deafening. Everyone at the table, Ryan's entire extended family, who had gathered for what was supposed to be a pleasant Sunday dinner, sat motionless forks, suspended in mid-air. But this wasn't shock at Ryan's violence. This was the silence of complicity, of people who had watched this family destroy me piece by piece and had chosen to look away. That was the moment I decided I was done being their victim. But before I tell you how I burned their world to the ground and rose from those ashes, I need you to do something for me. If you've ever felt trapped powerless or invisible in your own life, hit that like button. Subscribe to hear how this story ends because, trust me, the revenge is sweet. And drop a comment telling me, have you ever had to stand up to people who were supposed to love you? Now let me take you back to where this nightmare really began. It started 3 years ago when I married Ryan Mitchell. I was 26, working as a financial analyst at a mid-sized firm in downtown Chicago, and I thought I'd found my forever person. Ryan was charming, attentive, and came from what appeared to be a tight-knit family. His mother Eleanor seemed warm at first, always insisting I call her Mum. His father Thomas was quiet but kind, a retired architect who spent most family gatherings observing rather than participating. Ryan's older sister Sarah was a wannabe influencer, constantly filming everything for her modest social media following. At the time, I thought it was quirky. I had no idea it would become a weapon. The first red flag came 2 months after our wedding. Ryan suggested I add his name to my condo, the one-bedroom apartment in Lincoln Park that I'd scrimped and saved for years to buy. It was my pride and joy, purchased entirely with my own money, my name alone on the deed. But Ryan made it sound so reasonable. We're married now, area. What's mine is yours, and what's yours is mine, right? That's what marriage means. His mother had nodded approvingly when he said it over dinner one night, adding that it was only proper for a wife to share everything with her husband. I'd felt a knot in my stomach, but pushed it aside. I loved him. I wanted to trust him. So I said I'd think about it. But I never did it. Something deep inside me, some instinct for self-preservation, kept me from signing those papers. And thank God for that instinct, because it was the only thing that saved me in the end. The financial abuse started slowly, so gradually I didn't recognise it as abuse at all. Ryan suggested we get a joint credit card for household expenses. That made sense, we lived together, we had shared bills. But then I noticed charges I didn't recognise. $800 at a high-end electronics store. $1,200 at a designer outlet mall, $600 at a steakhouse I'd never been to. When I asked Ryan about it, he got defensive. I bought my mum a birthday present. Is that a crime? I took clients out for lunch. I'm building my career. You make more than me. Anyway, why are you being so petty about money? That last line was his favourite weapon. I did make more than Ryan. My analyst position paid well, while Ryan's job in sales at a mid-level pharmaceutical company was mostly commission-based, and he wasn't particularly good at it. But somehow that became my fault. He made me feel guilty for my own success, as if I owed him access to my money to soothe his wounded pride. And like a fool, I let him. I paid the credit card bills every month, watching the balance climb higher and higher. $4,000, $7,000, $11,000. I told myself it was temporary, that once Ryan's career took off, things would balance out. They never did. Eleanor started dropping hints about my condo about 6 months into the marriage. You know, Aria, dear, that place of yours is really quite valuable. Prime location, great investment potential. Have you thought about what you'll do with it long term? At first I thought she was just making conversation. But then the hints became less subtle. It would be such a smart move to leverage that equity. Ryan and I were talking, and with the market, the way it is, you could really maximise your returns. Perhaps it's time to think about the family's future, not just your own. The family's future. as if my hard-earned property was somehow a family asset that I was selfishly hoarding. But I smiled and nodded and changed the subject because I'd been raised to be polite, to keep the peace, to not make waves. Those lessons drummed into me by my own well-meaning but traditional parents were exactly what made me such perfect prey for the Mitchells. Thomas never participated in these conversations. I'd catch him watching his wife and son with this exhausted, disappointed expression, but he never said anything. Not to defend me, not to call out their behaviour. His silence was its own form of betrayal, even though I didn't recognise it then. The breaking point started about 3 months ago. Eleanor invited the whole family over for Sunday dinner, including some distant cousins I'd never met. The moment I walked in, I felt the setup. There was an odd energy in the room, a kind of anticipatory tension that made my skin prickle. We sat down to eat, and Eleanor spent the first 20 minutes talking about real estate values, about smart investment strategies, about family legacies. Then she pivoted smooth as silk. Aria, Honey, Ryan and I have been discussing your condo. We think it's time to make a smart decision about it. The cousins leaned in, interested. I felt my face flush. This wasn't a private family discussion. This was a performance designed to pressure me in front of an audience. Eleanor continued, "We think you should transfer the title to me. Just temporarily, of course. I have more experience with property management, and I can help you get the most out of it. We could rent it out, use the income to invest in something bigger for you and Ryan. It's really the smartest move." I stared at her, my fork frozen halfway to my mouth. Transfer my property to her. The condo I'd saved for sacrificed for the only thing in this world that was truly mine. Before I could respond, Eleanor slid a stack of papers across the table, followed by an expensive-looking pen. The papers were already filled out. Quitclaim, deed documents that would sign away my ownership with a single signature. All you have to do is sign right here, dear. We can have it notarized tomorrow. The room was silent, waiting. Every eye was on me. Ryan stood up and moved behind my chair, his hands settling on my shoulders. His grip was firm, just shy of painful. The gesture looked affectionate to anyone watching, but I could feel the threat in it. "Come on, babe," he said, his voice low in my ear. "Don't make this difficult. Just sign it. It's for us, for our future. Don't embarrass me in front of my family." That word embarrass struck me like a slap. As if my refusal to sign away my property would be the embarrassing thing in this scenario, not the fact that they were trying to steal from me in front of dinner guests. I looked down at those papers, at the pen sitting on top of them, and something inside me snapped. Not into anger, not yet. Into clarity. I saw with sudden, perfect understanding exactly what was happening. They'd been grooming me for this moment for months, wearing down my resistance, normalising the idea that what was mine was really theirs. And now they were trying to close the trap. I stood up so abruptly that Ryan stumbled backward. "No," I said. My voice came out steady cold. "I'm not signing anything." Eleanor's face went through a rapid series of emotions. Surprise, irritation, anger. Ryan grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in hard enough to leave marks. "Aria, sit down. We're not done talking about this." I yanked my arm away. "Yes, we are. I'm leaving." That's when Ryan grabbed the largest plate on the table. A heavy ceramic serving dish, piled with roasted chicken and vegetables, and hurled it at the wall next to my head with all his strength. The explosion of sound and debris was shocking violent, a physical manifestation of the rage that had been simmering under the surface of this family for months. Food splattered everywhere. Shards of ceramic embedded themselves in the wallpaper and scattered across the hardwood floor. One piece cut my cheek, a tiny nick that began to bleed. The message was clear. This is what happens when you defy us. This is what we're capable of. But instead of cowering, instead of apologising and sitting back down like the obedient little wife they expected, I did something that surprised even me. I bent down and picked up one of the larger shards of broken plate, a jagged piece that caught the light from the chandelier and glittered like a knife. I held it up, examining it with an almost clinical detachment, then looked at Ryan. "You just destroyed the last thing you had any power to destroy," I said quietly. The words came from somewhere deep inside me, some part of myself I'd buried under years of people-pleasing and conflict avoidance. I walked out without another word. Behind me I heard Eleanor's shrill voice calling me ungrateful, heard Ryan shouting for me to come back, heard the murmur of confused and titillated relatives. But I didn't turn around. I got in my car, drove to my condo, the place that was mine and mine alone, and sat in the darkness for a long time. Then I called my grandmother June. Grandma June was my mother's mother, a sharp-witted 82-year-old former paralegal who'd never particularly liked Ryan. I should have come to her sooner, but I'd been too proud, too ashamed to admit that my marriage was falling apart. When I told her what happened, there was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then she said, "Come over. Now, bring your documents. All of them." I spent that entire night at Grandma June's small but immaculate house in Oak Park. She had prepared for my arrival like a general preparing for war. On her dining room table sat 2 thick folders and a laptop. The first folder, labelled Legal Strategy, in her precise handwriting, contained copies of my mortgage documents, my deed, my bank statements, utility bills, every piece of paper that proved my sole ownership of the condo. The second folder, labelled Fraud Evidence, was even more damning. Grandma June had helped me gather credit card statements going back months highlighting charges I hadn't made. She had screenshots of text messages from Eleanor and Ryan, messages I'd shown her weeks ago in a moment of frustration where they discussed how to convince me to sign over the property. There were even printed receipts for home repairs I'd paid for receipts that had been altered to show inflated prices with the difference pocketed by Eleanor. "How did you get all this?" I asked, stunned. Grandma June gave me a small, satisfied smile. "I've been a paralegal for 40 years, sweetheart. I know how to build a case, and I've been watching those vultures circle you for months. I've just been waiting for you to be ready to fight back." The laptop contained even more ammunition. Grandma June had been systematically documenting Sarah's social media posts, the ones where she'd live-streamed family gatherings and made snide comments about me. "Look at this one," Grandma said, pulling up a video from 2 months ago. It showed Sarah filming herself in what I recognised as Eleanor's kitchen. In the video, Sarah was giggling as she said, "So my sister-in-law is like so uptight about money, right? But we're just trying to help her make smart decisions. Mum says once we get that condo in the family portfolio, we can really start building wealth. I mean, Aria's got the asset, but she doesn't have the brains to know what to do with it, you know." The video had over 5,000 views and dozens of comments, many of them mocking me by name. I felt sick watching it. But I also felt something else. Anger. Pure, righteous, clarifying anger. These people had been laughing at me, plotting to rob me and broadcasting their contempt to the internet, all while I'd been trying to be a good wife, a good daughter-in-law. Fuck that. Grandma June must have seen the change in my expression, because she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Now you're ready," she said. "Here's what we're going to do." We spent the rest of the night building my escape plan. Grandma June walked me through every step, teaching me how to organise evidence, how to communicate with lawyers, how to protect my assets. By the time the sun came up, I had a clear path forward. First, I'd file for a restraining order based on Ryan's violence, using the dinner incident and any other threatening behaviour I could document. Second, I'd serve him with divorce papers. Third, I'd issue a formal eviction notice because yes, Ryan had been living in my condo since we got married, and no, his name had never been on the lease or the deed. Fourth, I'd file a police report about the financial fraud and theft. And fifth, I'd make sure everyone who mattered knew exactly what kind of people the Mitchells really were. The next morning, I dressed in my best work suit, the charcoal grey Armani I usually saved for big presentations. I styled my hair in a sleek bun, put on my highest heels, and carried a leather briefcase I'd bought myself as a gift when I made senior analyst. I looked like I was going to court, because in a way I was. I drove to my condo, where Ryan had been staying, waiting for me to come crawling back. I used my key to let myself in. It was 7:30 in the morning. Ryan was in the kitchen making coffee, still in his pyjamas. When he saw me, his face went through a complicated series of expressions. Relief, smugness, then confusion as he took in my appearance. "Aria, baby," he started. "I'm so glad you're back. About last night I lost my temper, but you have to understand how frustrating it is when you won't even consider what's best for our future." I didn't respond. I simply walked to the kitchen table, opened my briefcase, and pulled out 2 envelopes. The first was a notice to vacate a legal document giving Ryan 30 days to remove himself from my property. The second was a copy of my restraining order petition, which detailed his violent outburst and requested that he be legally barred from coming within 500 feet of me. I placed both documents on the table in front of him. 30 days, I said, my voice level and cold. "That's how long you have to get out of my home. And Ryan, this is to make sure you don't hurt me again." Ryan's face went white. He picked up the papers with shaking hands, his eyes scanning the text. This is insane," he stammered. "You can't just kick me out. I live here. We're married." "I don't care," I said. "My name is on the deed. Only my name. This is my property, and I want you gone." That's when Eleanor appeared from the guest bedroom, still in her bathrobe. She'd been staying at the condo for the past week, another boundary I'd been too weak to enforce. She snatched the papers from Ryan's hands and began reading her face, turning an ugly shade of red. "You little bitch," she hissed. "You can't do this. You're Ryan's wife. This home belongs to the family." I opened my briefcase again and pulled out the thick stack of documents Grandma June and I had prepared. "No, Eleanor. This home belongs to me. And I have every piece of paperwork to prove it." I spread the documents across the table like a winning hand of cards. "Here's my mortgage with my name as the sole borrower. Here are the payment records showing that I've paid every single bill. Here are the utility records, the insurance papers, the property tax receipts. All in my name, all paid by me." Eleanor's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Ryan slumped into a chair, his head in his hands. But I wasn't done. I pulled out my phone and opened one of Sarah's videos, the one where she mocked me and discussed their plans for my property. I played it out loud, the sound of Sarah's sneering voice filling my kitchen. "I have dozens more like this," I said. "Your daughter was kind enough to document your entire scheme for fraud and financial exploitation. I'm sure the police will find them very interesting." The front door opened and Thomas walked in. He must have let himself in with Eleanor's key. He looked around at the scene, at his wife's furious face, at his son's defeated posture, at me standing there, in my armour of expensive clothing and legal documents. He set down his keys with a heavy sigh. "Enough," he said quietly. "Just enough." Eleanor whirled on him. "Don't you start, Thomas. We need to present a united front here. This girl is trying to destroy our family." Thomas looked at his wife with an expression I'd never seen before, something close to disgust. "Our family destroyed itself, Eleanor. You destroyed it." He turned to me. "Aria, I owe you an apology. I should have stopped this a long time ago." I didn't know what to say. Thomas had been a silent presence in all of this, neither helping nor hindering. His apology felt too little too late. But then he said something that changed everything. "There's something you need to know about that condo, Aria. It's not just a property, it's a legacy." He moved to the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline. "My father passed away 15 years ago. He left me several properties in his will, including this condo. But there was a condition. He made me promise that I would give it to the woman in our family who embodied certain qualities: kindness, independence, strength, integrity. Someone who would treasure it as a home, not just see it as an asset to be exploited." Eleanor made a strangled noise. Thomas ignored her and continued. "I thought about giving it to Sarah, but when Eleanor immediately started talking about selling it after my father's funeral, I knew neither of them deserved it. Then Ryan brought you into our family, Aria. And I watched you. I saw how hard you worked, how you treated people with respect, how you tried to build a real home for yourself. 6 months after your wedding, I had the title transferred to your name. You probably thought Ryan helped you buy it, or that you'd saved up enough on your own. But the truth is, my father's legacy paid for most of it. The deed is in your name alone, because that's how it was always meant to be." The room fell into stunned silence. I gripped the edge of the table, my mind reeling. You gave me this place. Thomas nodded. It was always meant for someone like you, someone worthy of it. Not, he glanced at his wife and son with undisguised disappointment, not for people who would corrupt my father's intentions. Ryan made a choking sound and dropped to his knees, not in remorse but in pure panic. He'd just realised he'd been trying to steal an inheritance that was never meant for him. Eleanor looked like she might have a stroke, her face mottled with rage and humiliation. But Thomas wasn't finished. I'm also prepared to testify in court, if necessary, about the financial abuse and coercion I've witnessed over the past year. I've kept my own records, my own documentation. I may not have spoken up before, and I'll regret that for the rest of my life, but I'm speaking up now. The final confrontation happened 2 weeks later on a Tuesday morning that started like any other. By then, the legal machinery had begun its inexorable grinding forward. I'd filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and domestic violence. The temporary restraining order had been granted within 48 hours, the judge taking one look at the photos of the shattered plate embedded in my wall and the small cut on my cheek and signing without hesitation. The eviction process was underway, with Ryan having already missed the deadline to contest it. My lawyer, a fierce woman named Patricia Chen, whom Grandma June had recommended, had also filed a civil suit against Ryan and Eleanor for financial fraud, identity theft, and attempted coercion. The evidence was overwhelming, meticulously organised in 3 ring binders with colour-coded tabs. The altered receipts with their suspiciously round numbers. The unauthorised credit card charges, each one highlighted and annotated. Sarah's incriminating videos transcribed word for word. Thomas's notarized testimony spanning 12 pages of detailed observations. The Mitchells didn't stand a chance, and Patricia had told me as much. This is the most open and shut case I've seen in 15 years, she'd said, a satisfied smile on her face. But desperate people do desperate things, and the Mitchells were nothing if not desperate. That Tuesday, I was in a morning meeting with my team reviewing quarterly projections when my assistant knocked on the conference room door. She looked flustered, uncomfortable. "Arya, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but there's a situation in the lobby. Your husband is here, and his mother and sister. Security is dealing with it, but they're asking for you." My stomach dropped. Ryan wasn't supposed to be within 500 feet of me. The restraining order was clear. But of course he'd come to my workplace. It was a calculated move, an attempt to humiliate me in front of my colleagues, to make me look like the architect of family drama, to pressure me into backing down by creating a scene in the one place I'd maintained my dignity and professionalism. I excused myself from the meeting, ignoring the concerned looks from my co-workers, and took the elevator down to the lobby. My hands were shaking, but I forced them still. I would not let them see me afraid. The scene in the lobby was chaos. Ryan stood near the security desk, his face red and blotchy, gesticulating wildly at the 2 security guards who'd positioned themselves between him and the elevators. Eleanor was beside him, dressed in one of her expensive St. John's suits, trying to maintain an air of dignified outrage, but failing miserably. Sarah had her phone out, naturally filming everything, probably already streaming it live to whatever followers she had left. Behind them, I could see other employees stopping to stare, phones emerging from pockets, the whispered rush of gossip beginning to spread. Ryan spotted me the moment the elevator doors opened. "Arya," he shouted, his voice cracking with emotion that might have been genuine or might have been performance. "Arya, please, we need to talk. You can't do this. You can't just throw away 3 years of marriage over one mistake." The security guards moved to intercept him as he tried to approach, but he kept talking, his words tumbling over each other. "I love you. I'm sorry. We can fix this. Just drop the charges and come home." Eleanor's approach was different, more aggressive. She pushed past one of the security guards, her Chanel bag swinging from her arm like a weapon. "How dare you?" she hissed at me. "How dare you come into our family, take everything we offered you, and then try to destroy us?" "That condo was meant for Ryan. You stole it from him. You're nothing but a gold digger who manipulated an old man and turned him against his own family." The lobby had gone completely silent. At least 30 people were watching now, maybe more. I saw my boss, David Chen, emerging from the executive elevator bank, his expression dark. I saw colleagues from other departments, people I barely knew, all of them witnessing this ugly family drama playing out in our pristine corporate lobby, with its marble floors and abstract art and carefully cultivated atmosphere of professional excellence. This was exactly what the Mitchells wanted. They wanted me embarrassed, wanted me to crack under the social pressure, wanted everyone to see me as the vindictive wife tearing apart a family. But I'd learnt something over the past few weeks. I'd learnt that the truth, when you have documentation and witnesses and an unshakable foundation of facts, is a hell of a lot more powerful than shame. I walked forward slowly, my heels clicking on the marble, until I was standing directly in front of Eleanor. Close enough that I could smell her expensive perfume, the same Chanel No. 5 she always wore. Close enough that when I spoke, only she could hear me. "No, Eleanor," I said quietly, my voice steady and cold. "Everyone here knows what kind of person you are. Someone who tried to steal property from her own daughter-in-law. Someone who raised a son who thinks throwing dishes at someone's head is an acceptable response to being told no. Someone who coached her daughter to publicly mock and defame me for internet clout. And now everyone else is going to know too." Eleanor's face went from red to white. Before she could respond, David stepped forward. "I need to ask you all to leave immediately," he said, his voice carrying the absolute authority of someone who'd built his career on managing difficult situations. "This is private property, and you're trespassing. If you don't leave right now, I'll have you arrested." Ryan made one last desperate play. He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket and tried to shove it toward me. "These are new divorce terms," he said frantically. "Fair terms, 50-50 split of everything. We can settle this without lawyers, without making it ugly. Just look at them, please." "I didn't take the envelope. I didn't even look at it." "Ryan, you violated a restraining order by coming here. That's a criminal offence. The police are already on their way," I said. And I watched his face register the shock of it. "You have about 3 minutes to leave before you get arrested in front of everyone." As they were being escorted out by security, Eleanor screamed at me across the lobby, her carefully maintained facade finally cracking completely. "You're destroying this family, Aria. You're tearing us apart over money, over a goddamn apartment. Everyone here knows what kind of vindictive, selfish person you really are. I hope you're happy. I hope you can live with what you've done." The elevator doors closed on them and the lobby erupted in whispers. I stood there for a moment, feeling dozens of eyes on me, feeling the weight of judgment and curiosity, and probably some degree of entertainment. Then David put a hand on my shoulder. "My office," he said, quietly. "Now." I thought I was in trouble. I thought maybe the company couldn't afford to have an employee whose personal drama was playing out in the lobby. But when we got to his office, David closed the door and said, "Are you okay?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. He poured me a glass of water from the pitcher on his credenza. "I know this is none of my business, but I need you to know that what just happened down there doesn't reflect on you or your position here. Your work speaks for itself. And for what it's worth, I've dealt with enough difficult people in my career to recognise when someone is being victimised and when someone is standing up for themselves. You're doing the latter." That was when I made my final decision. I wasn't going to hide what they'd done to me. I wasn't going to let them control the narrative, let them paint themselves as the injured parties, while I stayed silent to preserve some illusion of privacy. With Patricia's help, I drafted a detailed statement 3 pages long, outlining everything. The financial abuse, the manipulation, the attempted theft, the violence, Sarah's cyberbullying, Eleanor's coercion. I included copies of key documents redacted where legally necessary but still damning. Bank statements showing the unauthorised charges. Screenshots of Sarah's videos where she mocked me and discussed their plans for my property. Photos of the destroyed wall in what had been my dining room. Thomas's testimony about the inheritance and his father's wishes. I sent the statement to every member of the extended family, all those cousins and aunts and uncles who'd sat at Eleanor's Sunday dinners and watched her pressure me. I sent it to the mutual friends Ryan and I had accumulated during our marriage, the couples we'd gone on double dates with the neighbours in our building. I sent it to the board members of the charity organisations Eleanor volunteered with, the ones where she'd built her reputation as a pillar of the community. I even sent it to Sarah's remaining sponsors, the small businesses and local brands that were still paying her for product placements. I wanted everyone to know. Not purely for revenge, though I won't lie and say revenge wasn't sweet, but because I knew there had to be other people in their orbit, other potential victims, other young women who might be brought into this family, or people who might do business with them, and they deserved to be warned. They deserved to know what the Mitchells were capable of when they thought they could get away with it. The fallout was spectacular and it happened fast. Within 48 hours, Ryan lost his job. His employer, a pharmaceutical company with a strict code of conduct policy, couldn't afford to keep an employee who was facing criminal charges for violating a restraining order and civil charges for fraud. They terminated him for cause, which meant no severance, no good reference, nothing. Eleanor became a pariah in her social circle virtually overnight. The country club, where she'd been a member for 20 years, quietly suggested she might be more comfortable elsewhere. The charity boards she sat on asked for her resignation, citing the need to protect their organisation's reputations. Friends stopped returning her calls. Neighbours avoided her in the hallway. She'd built her entire identity on being respected, admired, seen as a woman of class and influence. In less than a week, all of that evaporated. Sarah's implosion was the most public, and I'll admit the most satisfying to watch. The defamation suit I'd filed against her sent her remaining sponsors running for the hills. The local boutique that had been paying her to model their clothes dropped her immediately. The meal kit service cancelled her partnership. The skincare line that had sent her free products asked for them back. But the real death blow came when her followers, the people she'd been performing for all this time, turned on her. Someone I never found out who created a compilation video of all her meanest, most mocking content about me set to ironic music titled "Influencer Bullies, Her Sister-in-Law Then Gets Sued." It went viral not on her account but everywhere else. TikTok, Twitter, Reddit. Millions of views, thousands of comments, all of them dragging her. Her account was eventually suspended after a coordinated reporting campaign, not just for harassment, but for doxing because she'd been sloppy enough to show my address, my workplace identifying details about my life in her rush to create content. Everything she'd built her modest but growing platform, her dreams of becoming a real influencer, her income stream gone. The family that had seemed so formidable, so united in their effort to break me down, crumbled like a house of cards. And I watched it happen with a mixture of satisfaction and something else, something more complicated. Not quite pity, but a kind of cold understanding. They'd built their lives on a foundation of entitlement and exploitation, and the moment someone refused to be exploited, the whole structure collapsed. There was a kind of justice in that asymmetry that felt almost poetic. Thomas filed for divorce from Eleanor 3 months later. He told me he'd stayed far too long in a toxic marriage, sacrificing his integrity to keep the peace. We became unlikely friends, meeting for coffee once a month. He was the only Mitchell I wanted anything to do with, and even that relationship was complicated. But he'd stood up for me when it mattered most, and I couldn't forget that. As for me, I reclaimed my life in every possible way. The condo became my sanctuary again, but this time I made it truly mine. I repainted every room, erasing the traces of Ryan's presence. I filled it with art. I loved books I wanted to read, furniture I chose for comfort rather than to impress anyone. I started hosting gatherings, not stressful family dinners, but evenings with friends, women's groups, workshops. I partnered with a local non-profit to offer financial literacy classes for women leaving abusive relationships, teaching them how to protect their assets and recognise the warning signs of financial manipulation. My own painful experience became a tool to help others. I also started therapy, real therapy, with a trauma specialist who helped me understand how I'd become so vulnerable to the Mitchells' manipulation. I learned about codependency, about the way my childhood had primed me to prioritize others' needs over my own, about the insidious nature of financial abuse. I learned to set boundaries, to say no without guilt, to recognize red flags before they became full-blown emergencies. It was hard work, painful work, but it was also liberating. The divorce was finalized 8 months after that terrible Sunday dinner. I kept the condo, obviously. Ryan got nothing because we'd never combined our assets despite his best efforts. The court ordered him to pay restitution for the credit card fraud, though I knew I'd probably never see that money. I didn't care. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the principle, about sending a message that you can't treat people this way and get away with it. 1 year after I walked out of that disastrous dinner, I stood on the balcony of my condo, looking out at the Chicago skyline at sunset. The city glittered before me, full of possibility. I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago, so desperate to be loved and accepted that I'd nearly given away everything that mattered. I thought about the moment I'd picked up that shard of broken plate and realised I was done being broken. They thought they could define me. They thought they could reduce me to a convenient source of money and property, a doormat who would smile and nod and hand over everything I'd worked for. But all they did was wake up a part of me I hadn't known existed. A part that was still wrapped in silk. A part that knew my worth and refused to settle for less. I'm not going to tell you that everything is perfect now. I still have hard days. I still flinch sometimes when I hear raised voices. I'm still working through the damage in therapy, probably will be for years. But I'm free. I'm mine again. And that's worth everything. So here's what I learnt from all of this. Your kindness is not weakness, but don't let people weaponize it against you. Your desire to be loved is natural, but not at the cost of your dignity and safety. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away from people who will never see your value. You can't fix people who don't think they're broken. You can only save yourself. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to make the choice between keeping the peace and protecting yourself? Have you ever walked away from someone everyone told you to forgive? Drop your story in the comments because I promise you're not alone. And if this story resonated with you, if it gave you hope or made you think about your own boundaries, hit that like button and subscribe. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes we all need a reminder that we're stronger than we think, that we deserve better than we've been accepting, and that it's never too late to take back our power. You are not what they did to you. You are what you do next.